You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Mr. Zach, please go ahead and introduce today's guest.
Hi, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm happy to introduce Dr. Rebecca Silveston-Keith. We're going to talk about measuring glucose in saliva. The biography that we have is that Rebecca is the co-founder of VetTab. She's also a CTO at Accessible Diagnostics, and she has a PhD in physical chemistry from Uppsala University. I think that the exclamation goes on the first part of the word, and she speaks English, French, and Swedish, which she learned to go to the University of Uppsala. And she's on the board of directors of Lexington Ballet. So, Rebecca, welcome to the show. Very interesting topic. Thank you for finding the time.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
So, we're not going to start right away jumping into it. I need to understand how one goes to Swedish school to do a PhD without knowing Swedish. How did you end up doing that?
It was an accident. So I was studying undergraduate in chemical engineering at university in Canada, and I applied to go to an exchange program for science and technology called IST for engineers. I applied to go to Switzerland because I have family in Switzerland, and it came back with a position in Sweden.
Sounds almost the same. Sweden, Switzerland. It's pretty close.
2,000 miles apart, but I'm like, why not? So I went to Sweden for 6 months and stayed 8 years.
Oh my God. So you did stay there for a while. So is Swedish much more difficult than other languages that you speak?
Nej, inte alls. It's actually, I think it's a lot easier than German or French in terms of conjugation. That doesn't mean it's easy. It's just easier. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So let's jump in. I'm very excited to learn about this. Other than the vet myself, my wife is diabetic. So measuring glucose, and this is for animals, I get it. And how did you come up with the model? Do they measure glucose in saliva in humans?
Do you know, we started with graduate students spitting in cups to do this test. And it was one of the board members that said, hey, can you do this for companion animals? Basically, the regulatory pathway is simpler. We could vet the product, pun intended, in the veterinary market. But there was such a demand from pet owners that it became, well, this is really a business to be able to do this in companion animals that have diabetes.
So then my question would be, how hard is it to make the cats to spit into a cup?
Yeah, that doesn't work. Cats are fractious, and it's actually one of the reasons that they're hard to monitor is because they have defense mechanisms when you're trying to test their ears or their paws.
They sure do.
Yeah, so coming up with a glucose monitor, I did have several cats in the study, not quite ready for the cat product. There's another study going on for that. So we actually developed this for dogs to begin with.
Wow.
Tell me a little bit more about how you came to the determination that, hey, there's a business here. That's always an interesting kind of light bulb moment. So let's double click on that.
So first of all, I had to establish that the science works. Basically, is saliva glucose correlated to blood glucose? So there was a lot of research done in that area. While we were doing that, I was actually attending conferences, veterinary conferences, and presenting the results all along the development way. And veterinarians had two questions for me, which was, does it work in cats, which is your first question, and how accurate is it, basically, and how much does it cost? What was fascinating was trying to then get the product in hands of consumers. They would just find us on the web without any advertisement. There was no point in trying to work through a veterinary market where vets are so busy and overwhelmed with everything else that goes on in our practice. Pet owners were calling us nonstop.
So that is very interesting because essentially you were going after the B2B. So you were developing a product, trying to develop it for the professionals. And it almost like worked out that you're building it B2C because the customers became not veterinarians, but the pet owners. Is that correct?
Yeah, what we're actually solving is not only the ability to take care of a beloved family member at home, your diabetic dog, but also the anxiety that goes along with that. And that's really hard for a veterinarian to do remotely. This system allows pet owners to measure painlessly the glucose using a saliva swab, but it also gives them feedback and says, hi, Ivan, Looks like Buffy's glucose is in a good range today. Great job. Keep it up. And that's amazing because these pet owners, these moms and dads, just really need that kind of feedback to stay on track. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you shared the story with us that there was also Vera introduced into the equation. So can you tell us about Vera and who it is?
Once we realize that what we're solving is bifold, the ability to test as well as the ability to help pet owners, calmly, collectively, manage their pets, we introduced Vera, who's a customer support person. The secret is Vera is actually many people. I get to be Vera some days because it's always good to have your hands on the product, but Vera is so popular. She emails pet owners almost nightly in the beginning to say, is there anything we can help you with? How's it going? I don't see a test from you, Ivan. What's going on? Is everything okay? We get about 20% of the pet owners responding instantly to Vera. Right away. I'm at the grocery store. I'll measure as soon as I get home. It's phenomenal. So when Vera doesn't email customers, they tend to email her. Now, it became very clear what we're solving is anxiety as well as a monitoring system. It's really a quality of life improvement.
That is very interesting because you're almost establishing with this Vera person. It's sort of like a model of the customer success. When I was running SmartFlow, my previous startup, I was available 24/7 because I was the only guy on support. But we also had an outbound email campaigns, and it also had my name, so they were automated. And then I remember one of the customers, one of the veterinarians, I don't think that he was aware of the whole like marketing automation. So he was emailing back and he was saying, "Oh my God, this Ivan guy, he never sleeps. Like he answers me, like he sends me emails at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., anytime." And I felt bad because in one way it was, showing our customers support and success. And then on the other hand, I felt like I was lying.
There have been customers that have asked when we sleep, basically.
But that's interesting because that's almost like, you're now approaching the market directly, and then they're looking for your solution, as well as you're also developing this model where properly automated. I think that, well, you said that there's multiple people, but properly automated, that could be a way to have a customer support behind it.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that Vera does, which is really important for the veterinary market, is Vera is not a vet. Vera doesn't give veterinary information. Vera never tells you to adjust the insulin. Vera says, "Hey, Ivan, that's not looking good. Have you called your vet?" And then we'll follow up a little bit later and say, "Did you call your vet? Yeah, just check in. We want to make sure Buffy's okay." That whole aspect of Vera telling the pet owner when it's important to contact their vet builds a better relationship between pet, owner, and veterinarian. And that's basically for the better health of the pet.
So then going back to the test itself, you mentioned that you were comparing the accuracy of the test. So where is that at? How is that accurate compared to regular testing? And what's the science behind?
Absolutely. So you can't see it because we're on the radio, but I still have all my fingers, and I have tested over 200 dogs at different points during development. And I have an entire freezer full cataloged by dog, gender, and breed of dog spit, basically. But what we did was we did parallel side-by-side testing with venous blood draws for dogs and saliva swabs. And saliva is a blood byproduct, like interstitial fluids that are used in continuous glucose monitors. So the glucose is being consumed as it's going through the system. By the time it reaches these end orifices, basically the saliva and the interstitial fluids, we're working with much, much smaller magnitudes of saliva. Of glucose in these saliva and interstitial fluids. So the accuracy of those two is very similar in terms of what it can predict. We're looking at 1 to 2 milligrams per deciliter, which would be like 100 in a blood glucose meter.
So you basically need a larger sample to be accurate. Is that?
No, you don't need.
Oh, you're just measuring in lower quantities.
And you have to be very, very accurate with very small color changes to be able to say that 1 is equivalent to 100, basically.
So are you the first one that had this light bulb moment, or was there someone else that started this and you kind of followed? Where's this coming from? It sounds like obvious thing to try. Was that ever done before?
So the whole company started with two other co-founders. One was Dr. Delphine Dean at Clemson University in bioengineering, who had a Gates Foundation grant to develop low-cost medical devices for underserved populations. And that she really pioneered the thought of, can we use smartphones for at-home testing? The other partner, John Warner, is a serial entrepreneur. He's the business side of this. So what they needed was somebody like me who takes ideas and turns them into products. So that's where the idea originated. Are there other companies out there? There's nobody doing it with saliva. There are people that measure urine, but urine's not as accurate as saliva. It is another fluid, but by the time you measure the glucose in the urine, you don't know how long it's been in the bladder. It could have been there for 20 minutes or 2 hours. So urine tests are really, really good indicators for, yes, my dog is diabetic. No, my dog is not diabetic, but nothing that you could then say, wow, we're trending in the wrong direction. We need to go back to the vet. We need to have a conversation about food and diet and insulin and doses. That's not possible on a urine test.
So, Rebecca, how accurate is the test? Because blood is quite well-known test that is quite predictable, and you can tweak your insulin treatment. How accurate is the saliva test?
So this saliva is just like continuous glucose monitors in terms of the accuracy, because both are blood byproducts, basically. So by the time the glucose goes from the bloodstream into these other orifices, the saliva and the interstitial fluids, you've lost a lot of signal. That being said, the system is accurate enough to tell a pet owner when their pet is in a healthy zone and when they need to go seek help. And that's really what's important. We don't want pet owners fixating on 260.2053 because it's just not relevant. Especially in pets, the range for a healthy zone is different than in humans. You're not going to make an insulin adjustment for a few digits difference. And what's even more important, diabetes is kind of a complicated disease. I would want that pet owner to talk to their vet before they do any adjustments. And that's one of the things that we really, really stress with this is make sure the pet owner and the pet are having really good conversations with their vet based on some of the at-home behaviors that we're able to provide them with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's, the diabetes treatment is a complex management at home. So, owners really need to understand it. And then I think there's a product that I've seen. It was litter for cats. That was also sort of an indicator. I don't know if you heard about it, but basically it was like, if it's not controlled and there's a high positive, then the litter changes the color, and that's an indicator. Contact your vet. It's not like adjust your dose. So would you compare it to that?
Yes. So urine is another blood byproduct. The glucose in the urine, you have no idea how long it's been in the urine. So the cat litter indeed is giving you, yes, the cat is diabetic. No, the cat is not diabetic. What it's not going to give you is trends that say, Ivan, your dog is, at 300, 350. It's consistently moving higher and higher and higher. It's going to start suffering consequences from high blood sugar. One of them being blindness. Dogs, and I've dealt with several dogs that are blind because the sugar was unregulated. If we can take a dog and move it from 600 down to 250, I consider that a success. Does it need to be 250.0? No. And I think many vets will support that, keep the pet in a healthy zone, understand when they're moving away from that healthy zone, what's happening in the diet, and have that conversation with the veterinarian.
Yep, absolutely. And then, so you wouldn't do like a glucose curve using this. You would you
can do a glucose curve. Yeah,
Wow.
You can do the glucose curve and it will give you trends because the glucose changes in relation to insulin and food all day long. And so you want to make sure there's no extended periods of high glucose or low glucose during the day. Ideally, you should be testing before feeding and injecting twice a day. That's what humans would recommend. That's in fact, the American Animal Hospital Association recommends to veterinarians to incorporate at-home test data into their standard of care. It doesn't exactly say how often you should test, but getting a good baseline would be with a clean mouth before food and insulin twice a day, get a good baseline, and then maybe you drop down to once a day testing. You can catch the trends then. You'll know that your dog is trending outside and you know when it's time to go into the vet.
That's a huge solution for the curve, because when you're bringing the animal in the hospital, they're stressed out to do it there, and then when you're doing it at home, you don't know how accurate it is and how how good owners are at doing that, and then what's their feeding habits and things like that. So, and then the animal might not respond in a way that you want them to respond, and then you don't know if it's the owner that is not measuring it accurately. I remember in my sort of early vet days, I had this client. It was a lovely lady, and then she had this cat that I was trying to regulate, and then she just wouldn't respond. Like, I didn't understand what was going on. So eventually, I was so frustrated, I came out with a book on veterinary internal medicine into the exam room, and I said, I don't remember what her Mrs. Smith. I said, "Can you read your cat page 86 through 92? Because your cat didn't read my book on internal medicine diabetes." So she thought it was pretty funny.
It's true, but one of the things we do is I actually have a research database. For every image that the user takes, we maintain an image. So we can go back in and look at the images and go, "Hey, Ivan, that's not looking good." And
Wow.
actually give you tips on using the test better. Did you collect enough saliva? Did you place the tab correctly? Was there anything going on with the lighting at home? Were you using one of those Christmas lights, with the leg and the red lamp? Did that alter the results? We have enough of the image database that we can help users in those first few weeks, because it's a new system, get up and running. And that's part of the value proposition for Vera, is helping those pet owners get reasonable data at home to then share with their vet.
So Rebecca, what is next? We have the test. It's available to consumers. We're writing articles, you said. So what is the next step of the product development, and where are we going with this?
So one of the things that we're doing is some product enhancements for usability, improving the saliva absorption into the pad so that we have a faster absorption. So it takes a user 3 seconds instead of 30 seconds by looking at pads that were created for saliva and not basically for urine. Once that's done, the next is actually, this is developed for dogs, but it's equally effective for cats. I had cats in the initial study. I wasn't convinced I was getting a good correlation, so I want to do a house-to-house version of this. Instead of having stress hyperglycemia of having the cat in the practice, I've got a vet on standby to go house to house and develop a cat version. There are other colorimetric tests for other chronic diseases as well that could be put into this modular system. So, chronic kidney disease affects 2.7 million cats in the United States. That's blood urea nitrogen. That's a colorimetric test that we can develop for this as well. So that would help
Wow.
pet owners be able to check that. There's more in production animals, leukocytes, for example. Mammary mastitis is important. Having a smartphone that could detect this with a colorimetric test, send the results to the veterinarian, could help that farmer not take the production animal out of service a lot faster than we could. And they're simple and low cost solutions. That's always been the objective.
Wow. I remember, I don't know much about production animals anymore. I only remember 10 plus years ago in the vet school when we were doing the California mastitis test. It was like a 4 quadrants. You kind of put the milk, and then you add the color, and then you mix it. So if that could be simpler, I think that maybe I would be attracted to the industry a little more and do more large animals. So I'm going to be on the lookout for that.
So this is a good point if there's any interested investors to step forward, because I would love to be able to do those follow-on projects.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.